Okay, everyone. So this is part B of the paper 3 that's coming up on the 17th of June. If you've not watched part A, I strongly recommend that you double back and go and watch that, and then definitely come back and watch part B. It's important that you have a good understanding of both sections, and that way you're going to get a much more rounded understanding of what's expected for you for paper 3. Okay, are there any questions before we begin in full of anything that we've covered in the last section that we did, last hour and 15 minutes or 20 minutes that we did? Give you 30 seconds to respond. A thumbs up or anything like that, just to let me know that you can hear me okay. Okay, good stuff. So assume that there are no questions. Thanks, Ollie, for just giving me the heads up. Good stuff. Perfect. So let's crack on and find out what we can do to understand how to approach this exam in the best way possible. So we've covered the players' attitudes and actions, as well as the future uncertainties. We've talked about the different topics, and we've looked at in detail the different topics. So if you've not watched part A, which we did a couple of hours ago, make sure that you go and watch that, because it will cover a lot of the skills that you need to know, as well as what content you need to learn. Okay, so one thing I mentioned on the earlier session, right at the beginning of that session on part A, I talked about the assessment objectives and understanding what they are. Now, one thing that comes up time and again for paper 3 is candidates who are not covering the assessment objectives in enough detail, and as a consequence, they're not doing as well on the exam as they potentially could have done. Now, part of that is their inability to apply their own knowledge, and part of it is to do with something a lot more detailed. So if we look at the 18 markers from the last 3 or 4 years prior to the pandemic, we can go back to the sample assessment materials. And what I'd like you to do is just read through these questions, okay? And then tell me what is the most common thing that comes up every single time. Let me know in the chat. What's this thing that keeps on coming up again and again and again? What are the common themes? Not in terms of topics, but the structure of the question. Okay, yeah, good. So Absolutely right. Evaluate's coming up. Maya, yep, absolutely. Resources are coming up all quite frequently. Um, Also, number 13, comparing or evaluating the success of things. So, if you want to hazard a guess on what's going to come up on your actual exam on Friday, then this will give you a really good idea. Note that every single time, every single year, it says study the resources in section B of the booklet. Okay, so if you're not familiarize yourself with section B of previous exams, have a look at it. Go dig out the old exam papers, have a look at section B. What does it look like? What kind of information am I seeing come up frequently? What am I having to evaluate? What diagrams may I have to look at? Okay. Now, evaluation is the key thing here. Every single time, every single question will be an evaluate question. Okay. So you should expect to be able to answer an evaluation style question in the exam. And therefore, you need to understand what evaluate actually means. Okay. Now, just on a side point, the paper 3, in terms of its topics, changes in terms of what issue you might be looking at, but really the theme is quite consistent throughout. It's, looking at how natural resources are being used. It's talking about how they can be managed, or how we can, reduce our use of them, make it more environmentally friendly, for example, or maybe reduce our dependency on fossil fuels. So just bear that in mind. Likelihood is that in the exam, you're going to have to make some judgments on resources. How can we protect ourselves? How can we not? Okay. Good question number 13. So I'm going to come to talk about that in a lot more detail in the next couple of slides that we're going to cover in this session. Okay. So here's the examiner report, taken out a subsection. Okay. And you don't have to read all of this. I've highlighted the key points here, right? So the 18-mark question in 2021 said that study the resources in section B of the resource booklet, evaluate the view that rotational resources in the Arctic and Antarctica will create more benefits, more costs than benefits. Now, the important thing that I've highlighted here, it says, with 12 of the 18 marks available covering AO1 and AO2, the dominance of AO3 in many responses was notable and, of course, unfortunate in terms of its impacts on the quality of those answers. That's really interesting. Okay. It goes on to say the best answers offered comparative examples of resource exploitation from their own studies, making appropriate parallels to challenges in the Arctic and Antarctica. It goes on to say another was able to argue that short-term economic benefits might be outweighed by long-term economic costs. So this idea of balancing your argument is very important, but it says right at the end, for most sadly, the only commentary came directly and sometimes verbatim from the resource booklet. So coming back to your point, 13, so you were talking about how you can use data from the resource booklet. You absolutely can, but that will limit you from getting into top band answers. So you've got to make sure in your answers for the 18 and 24 markers in particular that you are referring to or have reference to parallel examples that you have studied yourself. Okay. And also make sure that you are writing a balanced answer. So in this case, this candidate, for one of his answers, or one of her answers, has argued the short-term benefits outweigh the long-term economic costs. It shows that you're thinking about the material rather than just pulling, dragging, and dropping things in. The examiner report for 2020. Let's have a look at this question. Study the resources section B. Evaluate the view that economic development on natural resources inevitably leads to environmental degradation. So here again, the examiner is saying the assessment objective, the dominant assessment objective is AO2, and not as many seem to think, which is AO3. So back to that. Says apply knowledge and understanding in different contexts to interpret, analyze, and evaluate geographical information. Okay, so you've got to interpret the information, you've got to analyze the information, right? What is this showing me? What is it not showing me? Have I got evidence from somewhere else, a case study that I've studied, that I can apply in this context? All right, so remember, for the 18-mark questions, you've got to make those interpretations, those analyses with other areas that you've studied or case studies that you've looked at. Okay, you're not you know, you're not basically just pulling data from somewhere and then making a judgment on it. Okay, that's where a lot of candidates kind of drop a lot of marks. And it says here the most important the most important missing elements of AO2 were not were that although inevitable is a strong position, but can be justified, especially given the lack of any global program to just address it. Okay, so you've got to remember that there isn't just one viewpoint. There's no one right answer for things. Okay, it's not that this is this is what's going to happen and that's it. There's not one position on things. There's lots of different ways of looking at things. Maybe some things in the short term will be good. Maybe things in the long term will be good. But these are things that you're going to have to very, very carefully consider in your answer. Okay, let's move on. So, 24 markers, exam questions. Here are a list of those, so you can have a quick read. And again, what I'd like you to do is in the chat, just let me know what you think is the common theme in terms of the question, not in terms of the content. Okay, so what is the key thing that keeps coming up in these questions? Yeah, that's absolutely right. So what we've got here is a much more broader question, and it's taking into account uh, a wider spectrum of geography. Okay, so remember, the 24 marker is a single question. You're not going to get any other 24 markers in the actual exam, and this will be your final uh, ever question that you answer for A-level geography. Now you might be thinking, why is this 24 marks? So originally, the whole purpose behind the 24 marker was that it's a culmination of your understanding of geography that you've studied over a course of 7 years. Okay, so since coming in from year 7, working all the way through to sixth form, lower upper 6, year 13, year 12, whatever you guys call yourselves. Okay, all the way up to that point, everything that you know about geography, you should be able to apply in answering these questions here. So your examiner is really looking for your broader understanding of geography as a whole. And this is where maybe your teachers talked about the wider reading, or watching those videos, or watching documentaries, or whatever it might be, or reading the newspaper, watching the news. This is where it will really help you, because having a broader understanding of the issues that pertain to geography will help you to answer well structured, evaluative answers for these sort of questions. Okay, and the idea again is to have a balanced perspective throughout your answer, coming up with judgments which make sense, embedded with examples that you've studied throughout your geography studies. Okay, so if you wanted to, you could go and look at those exam papers in detail, look at the resources that are provided, and try writing 24 markers at home yourself over the next few days. I think it will be a really good idea to do so, purely from the perspective of learning how to structure your answers and getting a feel of, okay, I've got a certain amount of time to write these in. How can I structure this answer? Where will I allocate my time? How much time can I spend looking at the resources? Time yourself, right? Um, Maybe write out a plan. Time yourself. How long did it take you to write out your plan? If you need to use your textbook, if you need to use your resources, use them. All these little things will help you when it comes to actually doing your exam. So I strongly recommend you sit down and practice doing some. If only it will help you with giving you the confidence when you get into the actual exam of not being, surprised in the exam itself. And that's half the battle, right? So you're going to be pretty stressed out as it is in the exam, and this will help you to lower your anxiety for sure. Okay, so 24 markers. 2021, evaluate the view that Arctic is more likely to be a focus of short-term and long-term political conflict than Antarctica. So we could talk here for ages about the different people that are involved in, control of the Arctic, but that's not what this session is about. The session is about trying to understand what the examiner is looking for. Okay, so here, very few could go beyond simple assertive statements that lacked evidential support. That's a really big thing to say. All right. So again, 13, I'll go through the amount of time you need to spend on these in the next few slides. I'll go through that in quite a lot of detail. So coming back to this, just writing simple assertive statements like Russia planted a flag underneath the North Pole. Okay, that's great piece of information, but really what's the relevance of this? Okay, how will that lead to a short-term or long-term political conflict? Why is it that there is disagreements over the continental shelf between Russia and Greenland? Why is there a dispute between Canada and Russia? Why is Russia building, or has built by 2020 and built over 50 bases in the Arctic Circle? Why has it got over 250 military aircraft which are designed to work in extremely cold conditions? These are things that you should just know. The expectation is that you then able to draw on that information and write about it in the exam. Okay, so you should not be reliant on the resource booklet, but you should be more reliant on demonstrating your knowledge and understanding. Okay, so let's have a look further down. Unfortunately for many, the absence of AO1 and AO2 was telling, with a good deal of the resource book based repetition and statements that lacked support. Okay, now here's a tip for you in the exam. You're writing your paragraph, you finished it off. My suggestion would be read your own writing. Okay, if you have to whisper it to yourself, whatever it is, but the act of actually reading it back to yourself, you will then know whether you are repeating simply what's been said in the booklet, i.e. dragging and dropping information, okay, or whether you've applied your own knowledge in understanding into that paragraph, which will help to answer the question. So be reflective as you're going through. Make sure that if you can see that you're just repeating what the booklet's saying, then change what you're writing, okay, in the subsequent paragraphs. Okay, so this 24 marker, we can see evaluate the view that Latin American countries cannot develop whilst the USA remains dominant global superpower. 24 marks. Again, yeah, with the superpowers topic, this potentially a question similar to this could come up in your exam this Friday. So here, a very small number got the balance right between AO3, AO2, and AO1. The majority answers were too brief, lacked structure, tending to repeat a narrative derived largely from figure 8. So what the key takeaway there is that, again, don't just simply use one figure. Make sure that you're using a wide range of section B resources. Don't just fixate on one alone. And then make sure that you are analyzing and interpreting that information. Is this data valid? Is it actually relevant? It might not, there might be data there that may not be relevant to help you to answer the question. Have you identified that? If the examiner can see that you've done that, you're going to get higher level marks, right? So again, keywords were once again development, which is again not constrained to simply economic development, allowing a discussion of cultural imperialism or social development. So again, you've got to use keywords in your answer, right? So look at the question and think, all right, this is superpowers related. What keywords can I think of? Okay, there's hegemony, right? I know that the United States is the sole superpower. In the past, there was the British Empire, there was also the Soviet Union. Before that, it was a multipolar world. And there's a keyword that I can put in, multipolar, okay? Unipolar. Could I talk about, you know, Rostow's model of development? Maybe that might be relevant in this question, right? So whatever it might be, just write down all your keywords before you start answering the question. Don't just kind of just run straight into the answer. And often what happens is you just tend to just repeat what's been written somewhere else. So here it says, significant improvement could be made to all candidates who repeat the theme by paying closer attention to the need to draw on AO2 and AO1, right? So those are the two places where you need to really go in a little bit more harder, okay, and make sure that you're referring to those in a bit more detail. So let's have a look at what top candidates do. All right. So always write an introduction and try to return to it in your conclusion. If you write a plan, you will find it easier to know in what direction the essay is going. Don't make the plan up as you're going along. It will only take a minute, and it will be the best minute that you'll probably spend in the exam. Actually, you have many more minutes, which I'll talk about in a latter slide. Okay. So yeah, you can definitely reinforce your point through your own case studies. Whatever case study you think is relevant to help you establish that point or justify that point or contrast that point, use it. Okay, that will help you. So second bullet point, use the keywords in the question in your answer and make sure that you offer a view on them. So what that means is, if we go back a slide, okay, here, it's superpower. So make sure that you are using that word, or maybe you've categorized what that word means, okay? Certainly dominant superpower means that it's probably the only or sole superpower in the world. Is it a unique world that we are living in or not? Okay. Make each paragraph revolve around one point, which then you explain and illustrate with evidence. Better to have shorter paragraphs than longer ones, and when you make a point, offer some evidence for it immediately. Okay. Often what's kind of doing is they draw out some information, they just put the information down, and then they just assume that the examiner knows what to do with it. And I think that's not because I think most candidates tend to do that is because and subconsciously they're assuming that the teachers are going to mark their work, so the teachers must know what they're writing, and it must make sense. What you've got to do is imagine that the examiner doesn't know you, and certainly won't know you, and you've got to make sure that you're writing to somebody who literally is an empty vessel, and you are enriching them with your own knowledge and understanding. Okay. So finally, each paragraph should have one theme or idea with some evidence to support it, and a final sentence tying it back to the title. That will stop the essay drifting off topic. This happens so many times. You just have candidates that are writing an entire page, no paragraphs, all the way through, and all you find is they're just repeating themselves again and again and again and again. And you've got to keep the interest of the examiner, right? So if the examiner sees that you've got a clear introduction where you're establishing your points, you don't start an introduction by saying, I completely agree with this statement, right? Or I completely disagree with a statement. That should not be happening in your answer. The introduction is an opportunity for you to, a synopsis, write down what the essay is going to refer to, what are the topics that you're going to bring up. And so the examiner goes, great, now I can look for those things when you are going to rewrite your answer, and then they can tick them off. And that shows that you've got good structure and a good understanding. It's easy to read, and the examiner is interested in reading it. And then likelihood is that you're going to end up getting a good mark. Okay, so the strongest responses are from candidates who remember the lessons from section A and B of the resource booklet. So, what does that mean, right? Sections A and B. You've got to look at the material and go, okay, fine. What has worked and what didn't work? What is the patterns that you can notice where things are definitely a positive thing and where things are maybe a little bit more opaque and not so clear? All right. So the best candidates can see the data and think, actually, you know what, that doesn't make any sense, or that's a really good thing, and that's happened because of that. Okay. So spend time writing a proper conclusion. Conclusions must take a view on the question and justify that the view, drawing on key ideas from the question. Done well, this was a characteristic of the highest scoring answers. Very sound structure with thematic paragraphs. So once again, thematic paragraphs, make sure you're focusing on a specific thing that you're going to be writing about, then tie that back to the original question. And then the candidates that return to the question words, i.e., you saw in the previous one, superpowers was a key word that was used. Okay. If you're going to refer back to those keywords, okay, generally those candidates tend to write better. Okay. There's a clear counter argument that helps to illustrate any evaluation. All right. Okay, so I'm hoping this is useful for you guys. If you've got any questions regarding this, um, let me know. If you can just type in one thing that you are going to change, or one thing you're going to try to do in the exam, or one thing that has been suggested to you that you should do in the chat, so that I know that you are actually getting something from this. Okay, plan in the exam. Make sure you use more knowledge. Okay, more unpacking and spelling of my point. The points in the booklet need to be made sure that you analyze, not just copy in. Okay, good. And yeah, okay, good. Right, so, all right, just to repeat again, everyone, all right? The question, make sure that you highlight the keywords in the question, right? and then use those keywords in your answer throughout. Pepper it in, right? Before you start writing your answer, underline them and maybe make a list of keywords that you're going to use that are relevant to that topic. So, for example, for superpowers, you should be using words like hegemony, hard power, soft power, okay? Military intervention, all right? Economic sanctions, the United States of America, China, Russia, BRICS, okay? These are the sorts of words and acronyms that you should be using in your answer throughout. So make sure you do that, and make sure that you are writing, and no one's really mentioned here, so I really want you to take this away tonight, okay? Not just simply just planning, but you are writing a specific paragraph with a specific theme that will then, at the end of that paragraph, you're going to refer back to the original question and you're going to answer that particular question. That's what you're going to do, okay? You're going to do that for every single paragraph. You're not just going to write a whole page as your paragraph, okay? So make sure that in your plan that you've established what are the key points you're going to make. Remember, you're going to have a balanced argument. One paragraph might be pro or against or whatever it might be. And within that paragraph, you need to use the resources from section B and maybe section A, depends if you want to use those, if they're relevant, but then also integrate it into your understanding and wider knowledge of geography as a whole. It's not about just plastering case study information. It's about using that case study information appropriately to make a point or to justify a point of view, or whatever it might be. Okay, good stuff. Let's move on. So next bit, we're looking at what top candidates don't do. Okay, absence of the definition of key terms. For example, in this case, superpowers and development. It's too long trying to critique the resource booklet, so they lose sight of the question. You're too busy just copying and pasting from the resource booklet without actually applying anything else. Our answers are largely, if not exclusively, dominated by material drawn by the booklet, a poor selection of material from the booklet with many resources only partially used. We state earlier points, but then throw up their hands, metaphorical hands that is, and stated how difficult it is to say how things would turn out, right? So this is very common. A lot of candidates will just go, well, you know, on the one hand, it could be good. On the other hand, it might be bad. But actually, we don't really know what's going to happen. And that's my answer. No, I'm afraid if you want to get top level marks, you can't write something like that. Okay. You've got to say, you know, you've got to talk about, if you're going to talk about temporality, if you're going to talk about time periods, you know, you've got to talk about the fact that it's going to, in the short term, it might be beneficial or it might be really bad, then justify that point of view. And then say in the long term, the benefits of this may be this or that. Okay. But what you're not going to do in the exam is just say, you know, it's up in the air. Who knows what's going to happen? That's not the point. The point of the exam is for you to demonstrate that you can think of some solutions, okay? Or you can think of what the problems might be 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road from now, okay? Next, fail to offer any summative statements. Don't just say time is an issue. Qualify the points that you make. So just the point that I just made there, right? Don't just say that time will tell, right? You've got to say, well, in the short term, 1 to 2 years, this could happen. And then qualify it, give some justification for it. So lack of analysis, particularly for questions 3 and 4. These are the shorter questions, the 8-mark questions, 5 and 6, which are the longer questions, the 18 and 24 markers. And thus lack of AO1 and AO2 material. So I've already gone over the assessment objectives, but don't worry, I will go over them again with you very shortly. So hopefully now you've got a much better idea what to do in the exam. Please, 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 please make sure that in your answers that you are bringing in your own points of view, you're writing well-structured paragraphs, you're not making blanket statements over things. Make sure that you are building in that detail into your answer. There we go again, the assessment objectives. So remember, you need to demonstrate your knowledge and understanding of places, the environment, concepts, processes, interactions, and change at a variety of scales. Okay, so this is very, very important for the longer answer questions, 18 and 24 markers. You also need to apply your knowledge and understanding. What a lot of candidates tend to do is just jump straight into AO3, and they tend to just evaluate the evidence rather than actually demonstrating that they understand what the processes are, how one thing might influence something else, and also they tend to skip the analysis part as well, which is, you know, not good. Exam timings. I'm sure you've been waiting to find out what to do in the exam. So your exam is 2 hours and 15 minutes. It's a long paper. So question 1, 4 marks. How much time should you spend? About 8 minutes reading and writing your answer. I think that's probably going to be more than enough time for you to do that. Questions 3 and 4, both are 8 marks, so you've got 16 marks in total there. How much time should you spend? About 16 minutes. So, that's going to be more mathematical style questions that they might give you a table to work out an equation or something like that, and maybe answer a question on it, something like that. Okay, so just be aware of that. And then questions 5 and 6, this is where the lion's share of your time should be spent. So question 5 is going to be 18 marks, and you should probably spend just over half an hour doing that question. Now, this includes the reading and the writing time. Obviously, you know how much time you need to read and write things, but under time pressure, we actually have our minds are not able to accurately judge what the time is. Okay, so I would strongly recommend that you've got a watch, you put it on your table, okay, and then you give yourself, you go, okay, fine, now it's 1:30, right, I've got to spend 15 minutes, so by 1:45 I'm going to start writing, right? Giving yourself that mental space that you don't have to be thinking about in your head, creating time in your head, trying to figure out what the time is going to be. You've got it laid out, it's simple for you to follow. Okay, so make sure that you spend some time reading. It takes time for you to digest information. Just on a side note, if I don't know if you guys have got this in the morning or in the afternoon, the exam, just be mindful of, before going to the exam, that you're not going in on an empty stomach, because you're not doing your brain any favors either. And don't go into the exam having pumped yourself with lots of sugar. Okay, neither are actually going to help you. Okay, you're not allowed watches anymore. I wasn't aware of that. Okay, not even a regular watch. Okay, well, there you go. You learn something new every day. So yeah, just keep an eye on the clock in that case. But make sure that you're going in, you've had a good, healthy breakfast before you've gone in, not something that's going to drain the blood from your brain. Okay, and that you have take plenty of fluids. Okay, so you've got water with you that you can sip on, not down during the exam. Right. Question number 6, 24 marks. You spend about 48 minutes on this, reading and writing. Remember, this is the most important question in the exam. Okay, this is the culmination of your A-level geography. All right, so you've got to give it time. You've got to think about, what points you're gonna make. Well, if you're trying to impress somebody about your geographical knowledge, how can you impress that examiner with all and everything that you know in what you write? What you write is a representation of you, unless of course you're typing, which is, it can be slightly different. But if you're writing by hand, if you write clear paragraphs and you've got some themes behind them, the examiner is going to be more positive about reading your answer, because most candidates won't do that, and they might give you the benefit of the doubt. Okay, so bear that in mind for that 24 mark question. Now, 70 marks in total is 108 minutes in total if you use my timings. And if you use those timings, you've still got another, or just under half. You still got a little bit, under a half an hour left, right? So that gives you more time to come back and read your answers, and that way you can absolutely, make sure that you've answered the question, particularly the 18 markers and 24 markers. You can go back and look at those paragraphs and go, right, fine. Does that make sense what I just wrote? Okay, I need to change something, or I need to add something to that paragraph. Okay, so make sure that you do that in the exam for those paragraphs, because it will really make a difference. Now, I know someone earlier was wondering about what the exam actually looks like. What I'll do with you now is just very quickly, I'll share that with you, share a screen with you and take you through the exam questions, well, not questions, yeah, well, what the paper looks like, so that you're not going in completely blind. So let's have a look here, and we're going to come back to that slide because I've got a couple of more things that I want to talk about. So this is this is a sample paper which the exam board have kind of published. Okay, and obviously make sure that you're using black ink, all right, in the exam, and you've got to make sure that you fill in all the boxes at the top. Okay, don't write your name as Batman. Yes, I have had candidates before who've written that. So fill in the boxes, answer all the questions. Obviously, any calculations must show all stages of working out. Now, your calculation might be wrong, but if you've demonstrated your working out, you might end up getting a mark. So just make sure that you bear that in mind for the exam itself. Also, advice. Your advice: spend the first 15 minutes reading the resource booklet. Okay. Now, if the examiner is telling you read the booklet 15 minutes, there's a really good reason to be doing it. Okay. So go ahead, and then what I would suggest you do is that in those 15 minutes, you're annotating it, maybe picking out the anomalies in the resource booklet, picking out, you might want to get 3 highlighter pens. You might want to get 3 highlighter pens, highlight the booklet with 1 highlighter pen for players, 1 for attitudes that they might have, and another color for actions that they have put in place. And that way, when you're looking at the booklet, when you're quickly trying to answer a question, you're coming back to the booklet and you're looking for, oh yeah, players, right? Oh, I know where that is because I highlighted it in this color, right? So color code your booklet, and then that way it'll be easier for you to consume that information afterwards instead of just seeing black text everywhere on the page. Okay, good. So that's that. So first question will typically be a 4-mark question. It's very straightforward, and it will just question, or your understanding of the basics of the topic that's at hand, right? So in this case, explain why future global warming may be inevitable. That's actually a good question for you to answer just as practice at home in the meantime. So I'd suggest that you try it and do that. The second question generally will tend to be like a mathematical sort of one. So you can see here they've got a table here, and then they've got a Spearman's rank, and then all you have to do is work out your Spearman's rank. They've given you the formula. I mean, it's just dead straightforward. You fill in the blank there. By the way, just a heads up, a lot of candidates just forget, like if they've got a table, there's a blank space and they don't even put anything in because they're so stressed out by the exam that they miss out the little free pointers, the free marks, really, essentially, where you can get pick up 3 or 4 marks without doing much. So here, then it will ask you to answer a question based on the table. So in this case, explain why the data used in table 1 might not be a reliable guide to the impact of global warming on snow and ice coverage. And then after that, you'll get into the studying the figures 1, 2, and 3 in section A. So questions 3 and 4 will be around that. So in this case, analyze the evidence, right? So you're just picking out the key points and go, right, this is what this is why it is what it is. Okay, 8 marks. Analyze again the global implications of change in these polar regions. So you're looking at a point, then explaining that point, picking another point, explaining that point, picking another point, explaining that point. That's it for these questions. Question 5, all right, and question 6, obviously long answer questions. So this is 18 marker. Study the resources in section B. Evaluate the view that exploitation of resources in Antarctica will create more costs and benefits. And obviously, you can scroll back on that video just earlier today, and you can look at what the examiner said if you're unsure about what to write for this. Now, note how much space that they've given you exam. Of course, this is the recommended amount of space. You don't. Ideally, you should not be writing more than the space that they've given you. Okay, this is not an exercise in let me plaster everything that I know about geography and just pray that you're going to get some marks, right? Be mindful about what you're going to write. So my suggestion would be maybe take the first couple of lines, write out a proper plan. Okay, what's your theme of your first paragraph? What's the theme of your second paragraph? What's the theme of your third paragraph? What's the theme of your conclusion? Okay, what case studies are you going to use in your answer? What data have you got from your own knowledge? What data are you going to use from the booklet? So spend time on this. So remember, I said for 18 markers, you can spend 36 minutes. 36 minutes, that's quite a lot of time, right? So think about how you can allocate that time. I want to spend 5 minutes planning this out properly, okay? And then attacking the question. Would I recommend 2 long paragraphs for an 8 marker or maybe 3? I would say generally shorter paragraphs that have a good key point and are validated by evidence and then refers back to the question is better than 2 long paragraphs. Okay? And if you need extra paper, just ask. All right? So if you're not sure about things, just ask that. Aryan, welcome. We've got a student here, he's not even doing geography and has joined in the session. Good man, Aryan. So that's the key thing. For question, for the 18 marker, you've got to do that. All right, guys. So otherwise, you're not going to do as well. Now, the 24 marker. Now let's have a look at how much space you have. This is how much space that they've given you. Was it 2 pages, right? Now, in all honesty, what will often happen here is that most candidates, if they haven't listened to what I've just said over the last 45 minutes, hour, whatever it is, they will just go in and literally just launch into the question, just write everything that they can think of, and they'll just copy and paste from the resource booklet. Obviously, you're not going to do that. So the first thing you're going to do, remember that you've got about 48 minutes to write this. You've just got about an hour almost, just under, to write this answer. So again, spend 5 minutes if you need to, plan out your answer, what you're going to write in the first paragraph, what second paragraph, third paragraph, what's your conclusion going to focus around, what's your introduction. And, by doing that, it will help you to really construct your introduction, because otherwise you can be all over the place. What are the key case studies that you're going to use, what examples, what data do you have? Same structure as the 18 marker. Okay, so again, do you need to write 2 sides? The best candidates will be able to plan a really good answer and then write a really succinct answer, i.e. they'll be able to write within those 2 pages, okay? But under time pressure and so forth, majority of candidates probably will end up getting another piece of paper and going on to write further on the answer, purely because you're in the zone and it's your final whatever question that you're going to be answering, right? So make sure that you review your answer. You've got then additional 25 minutes or so to go back and read your answer. And I mean literally read your answer. Don't just read it with your eyes, okay? Pretend to read it to yourself as you are, so you can hear yourself saying those things, because what will happen is when you hear yourself, you'll be like, oh wait, hang on a minute, that doesn't make any sense. What am I talking about here? How can I change this? Then that allows you to edit your answer, and then you leave the impression of a really good answer at the end. All right. So that's that paper. So it's a long one, but it's at the same time one in which you can do very, very well if you plan your time, because you've got plenty of time to answer the questions. Okay, so that you use them appropriately. Final recommendations. Final recommendations. If I haven't really emphasized the key points, always highlight the keywords and use the keywords in your question. Annotate the questions before you start answering the questions. For longer answer questions, review at the end of each paragraph and think, how is this answering the question? Okay. And if it's not, then you need to rewrite that final sentence. Okay. Use words such as because, despite, some, but, etc. Use case study material to demonstrate the point that you're emphasizing. Short answer questions, 100 words, like the 4 markers. I mean, why are you writing a page? Okay. Um, write in the third person. The most critical factor appears to be, okay, do not ever start an introduction to an essay question with I completely agree with this or I completely disagree, and then just plaster all the information that proves your point of view. Okay. Make sure that you are balancing your answer out. And the key thing is to write with authority, right? So if you're spending that time planning out what you're going to say in each of the paragraphs, and then you've got a theme to each paragraph, and you can refer back to the original question, that will speak authority. Okay. That's what shows the examiner, you know what, this person, they've really got this. They're really thinking about what they're writing. And just because they're doing that, we're going to give them marks. Remember, assessment objective 1 and 2, you're going to critically analyze the information and provide evidence. It's not just a case of saying, I completely agree because, this is a better, short-term solution than a long-term solution. It's about giving the evidence for it and analyzing it. And one thing I'd have to say again here, final bullet point here, is write it neatly. I know it goes without saying, right? Writing clearly and neatly, but you've really got to do this because the amount of people under time pressure and what happens to their handwriting just goes right out the window. Okay. If I can't read your writing, how am I going to give you the marks? Okay. I mean, it goes without saying. And the thing is, I understand that you're under time pressure, but actually you've got a lot of time to plan. You've got time to think. You've got time to be able to write neatly. It's not a case of, again, plastering everything that you think is relevant. And I can tell you now, if you walk out this exam and you think you murked it and you smashed it or whatever, okay, likelihood is that you haven't. Okay, you should not be coming if you're coming at the exam and your head is hurting, okay, then you've probably done a really good paper. Okay, but if you come out of this exam and you're walking out and you're like, yeah, this is great, best thing I ever did, it was so easy, yeah, I smashed it, yeah, I just used all those resources and I put that in, I put that case study in. If you're talking with a real kind of thing, just don't. Okay, slow down. Okay, slow your process down. You've got plenty of time. You've got the clock on the wall. You can just time yourself. Go, all right, cool. I've got 15 minutes. Right, I'm going to keep an eye on the time. I'm going to write my plan out. I'm going to write slowly. I'm going to write thematic paragraphs that relate back to the original question. Okay, I'm not going to just plaster information. Then you're going to be doing majority. 90% of the people are not going to be doing what you're doing. Okay. Right. So write clearly and neatly. And good luck. All right. So you've done everything that you can possibly do to be able to get the best marks for your A-level geography. My suggestion would be now go away over the next couple of days. You've got plenty of past papers out there. Go and grab them. Do some questions. Look at those exam questions that we've looked at. Look at what I've talked about. Maybe you want to spend some time looking at the types of graphs and charts that you might need to analyze. Maybe attempt answering those questions from that other paper that I just showed you. Try doing some short answer questions or analysis questions from the superpowers topic. That could be a good shout for you. Globalization topic obviously is a majority of it, so go and pick out some old papers and do the short questions from it, right? The 4 markers and so forth. So use language, person number 13, use language which is appropriate, okay, from the question itself, okay. Right, are there any questions besides that one? Yeah, some people might have different times for the exams because it's all about timetabling, so it's a little bit different. I'm not sure what you're referring to, James. Anyway, so any other questions besides that? You're welcome, Andrew. Remember, you've got to make sure that you're referring to those um, specific examples. All right, Andrew. Make sure you write out the names or examples in your answers you go through. James, this is we're looking at Excel here. Okay, so if there are not any other further questions, I just want to say a massive thank you for turning up and um, really trying to understand what's going on here so that you can do your best. Um, I've enjoyed running these sessions for you guys. I really hope that it's made a difference and is helping you guys to, help you to prepare for your exams. I really hope that most of you are going on to geography at university, and you are going to smash it out of the park. In the meantime, if you do have any other questions that haven't been answered or anything like that, you can pop them in the comments of the videos that I've posted. Obviously, please do share this with your friends and so forth so they can benefit from it too. If you're sharing it, more likely is that you're actually going to be watching it more, and then you're going to be even more prepared than everyone else, right? So please do go share, like and the video too, write comments in it. Okay, that can benefit everybody else at the same time. In the meantime, best wishes for your next steps to university. I believe that most probably finishing off your exams this week, if not next week. Good luck with all your other exams too, and good luck with whatever you're choosing to do at university. All right, guys. Thank you very much.